Have you ever looked up at the night sky and wondered if what you're seeing is God? Not a figure sitting on a throne above the clouds, but the universe itself. The endless expanse of stars, the swirling galaxies, the laws of nature, and the invisible forces that govern every moment of your life. What if God wasn't somewhere else, watching from a distance, but everywhere, woven into the very fabric of existence? This isn't a new idea. In fact, one of the most radical and dangerous philosophers of the 17th century believed it too. His name was Baruch Spinoza, and his vision of God would cost him everything. In his lifetime, Spinoza was excommunicated, shunned by his community, and labeled a heretic. Yet centuries later, some of the greatest minds, from Einstein to Nietzsche, would call him one of the purest philosophers to ever live. Why? Because he dared to suggest that God and nature are not separate, that everything we see, feel, and experience is part of one infinite, divine substance. And that substance, Spinoza said, is both God and the universe itself. To truly grasp the power of Spinoza's philosophy, you first have to understand the world he was born into. In the 1600s, religion wasn't just a private belief. It was the law. Questioning the idea of a personal God who intervened in human affairs wasn't merely controversial, it was dangerous. But Spinoza was different. Born into a Jewish community in Amsterdam, he received a traditional religious education. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that the world around him wasn't governed by a distant, personal deity, but by something far more vast and impersonal. He saw God in the relentless patterns of the natural world, in the mathematics of the stars, and in the unbroken chain of cause and effect that moved the universe. For Spinoza, the idea of a God with human emotions, one who gets angry, forgives, rewards, or punishes, made no sense. Why would an infinite, eternal being possess such temporary human traits? To him, the very act of imagining God as a person was a mistake, a projection of our own limitations onto the cosmos. Instead, Spinoza believed that God is nature. Not nature in the sense of trees and rivers alone, but nature as the totality of existence. Every rock, every thought, every heartbeat, every star, every law of physics, all of it is a single, infinite, self-sustaining reality. He called this infinite substance deus sive natura, God or nature. Two words for the same thing. In this worldview, nothing exists outside of God, because God is everything. There is no separation between creator and creation, no supernatural realm above or beyond the physical. The laws of the universe are divine laws, and everything that happens follows necessarily from those laws. This means, for Spinoza, there's no such thing as miracles, no suspension of natural order. Everything that occurs, from the movement of planets to the fall of an apple, happens through the unchangeable laws of nature. What we call miracles are simply events whose causes we don't yet understand. And in this way, the divine is not above nature, but inside it, indistinguishable from the logical, structured, and relentless unfolding of reality. But this raises a profound question. If God is everything, where does that leave us? What is the purpose of our lives? In Spinoza's philosophy, human beings are not special creations set apart from the rest of existence. We are expressions of the same infinite substance, subject to the same laws as rivers, storms, and galaxies. Yet we are also unique, because we possess the ability to reason. And through reason, we can understand our place in the grand order of things. For Spinoza, the path to freedom doesn't lie in escaping nature, but in understanding it. The more we comprehend the causes behind our emotions, our desires, and our place within the web of existence, the less we are enslaved by illusions. By recognizing that everything happens through necessity, that nothing occurs by chance or divine whim, we free ourselves from false hopes and fears. He believed that most human suffering comes from our attachment to the idea of free will and our mistaken belief that we can control the world according to our wishes. We feel anger when things don't go our way, grief when we lose what we love, and fear of an uncertain future. But if we understand that everything follows from the eternal necessity of nature, we can achieve a kind of peace, not a passive resignation, but an active joy in aligning ourselves with reality as it truly is. Spinoza called this state intellectual love of God. It's not the love of a personified deity, but a profound, serene joy that comes from understanding the unity of all things. When you grasp that you and the world around you are expressions of the same infinite substance, the barriers between self and other begin to dissolve. You realize that your own desires, pains, and joys are threads in the vast, interconnected tapestry of existence. This philosophy has staggering implications. It suggests that everything you experience, every thought you have, every decision you make, is a necessary outcome of the total system of nature. In one sense, this can feel unsettling, as though we are merely cogs in a vast machine. But Spinoza believed the opposite, that through understanding necessity, we attain true freedom. Not freedom from the laws of nature, but freedom within them, by choosing to live in harmony with their patterns rather than in futile resistance. He argued that emotions like envy, hatred, and fear arise from misunderstanding our nature and the nature of others. These emotions chain us to external circumstances and prevent us from achieving lasting peace. But through the power of reason, we can overcome these disturbances. We can recognize the causes behind our emotions and learn to transform destructive passions into active, life-affirming emotions like generosity, gratitude, and resilience. Spinoza's universe is not one of punishment and reward, but of necessity and coherence. In such a world, ethical behavior isn't commanded by an external lawgiver, but arises naturally from the recognition that harming others is, in a sense, harming oneself. Since everything is part of the same substance, to nurture others is to nurture the whole, including yourself. Yet in his own time, these ideas were seen as profoundly dangerous. By denying a personal God and proposing that Scripture should be read as allegory rather than literal truth, Spinoza challenged the very foundations of religious and political authority. In 1656, the leaders of his Jewish community issued a cherem, or excommunication, condemning him with the strongest curse in their tradition. His name was erased from records, and he was cut off from his family and friends. Despite this, Spinoza did not become bitter or seek revenge. He lived a quiet, modest life, supporting himself as a lens grinder while continuing to write. His magnum opus, Ethics, was published posthumously in 1677 and would go on to become one of the most influential works in the history of philosophy. The power of Spinoza's thought lies in its radical simplicity. He removes the human-centered drama of divine favor and punishment and replaces it with a vision of an infinite, self-sustaining universe. In doing so, he offers not despair, but liberation. If nothing happens by chance, and everything follows necessarily from the nature of things, then there is no point in resentment or regret. The task is not to fight reality, but to understand it, and through that understanding, find peace. His philosophy also anticipates modern scientific thinking. The idea that the universe operates through consistent, discoverable laws is a cornerstone of contemporary physics. Einstein, who openly admired Spinoza, once wrote that he believed in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists. This harmony, Spinoza taught, is not cold or indifferent, but profoundly beautiful, once we learn to see it. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Spinoza's philosophy is the nature of freedom. When people first encounter his idea that everything happens by necessity, it can feel suffocating. If every action, thought, and event is determined by the unbreakable chain of cause and effect, what room is left for freedom? What becomes of human agency, of choice, of responsibility? But Spinoza redefines freedom in a way that turns this question on its head. For Spinoza, freedom does not mean acting without cause, outside the laws of nature. That's an illusion, a fantasy born from ignorance of what shapes us. True freedom, he claims, comes from understanding the necessity behind events and aligning ourselves with it. When you grasp the reasons why you feel envy, anger, or fear, those emotions lose their hold on you. You're no longer a passive subject, tossed about by forces you can't name. You become an active participant in your own life, able to direct yourself with clarity because you understand the nature of the forces at work. This understanding leads to what Spinoza calls the highest human good, a state of serene, joyful wisdom, born not from blind faith or hope, but from deep comprehension of how the universe functions. And here lies the heart of Spinoza's philosophy of nature. The natural world is not a backdrop for human drama. It's not a collection of resources for our use, nor a hostile realm to be conquered. It is, in every sense, divine. It is God in its endless, infinite unfolding. When you begin to view the world this way, even suffering takes on a different quality. Spinoza never denies that pain, loss, and grief are real. He knew them intimately. Yet he teaches that much of our suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our misunderstanding of their nature. When we expect the universe to conform to our wishes, when we hope for outcomes that defy the natural order, we guarantee ourselves misery. But when we come to see that everything follows necessarily from the essence of things, we stop fighting the current and start moving with it. This doesn't mean passivity or indifference. It means cultivating a kind of inner resilience, a strength rooted in wisdom. Spinoza believed that a person who understands the nature of things will neither pity nor envy others. They will not be consumed by pride or shame. Instead, they will act from the perspective of reason, seeking to enhance their own well-being and that of others, because they see that all beings are expressions of the same reality. And perhaps the most beautiful consequence of this philosophy is the dissolution of rigid boundaries between self and world. If everything is one infinite substance, then the separation between I and other is a useful fiction, a necessary convention for navigating daily life, but not an ultimate truth. Spinoza's ethics leads us to a state where we feel genuine compassion, not because morality demands it, but because, through understanding, we recognize others as extensions of ourselves. This view reshapes how we think about death too. In a world governed by a personal God who punishes and rewards, death carries with it the terror of judgment, of being cast into hell or rewarded with paradise. But for Spinoza, death is not a moral transaction. It is a transformation within the infinite unfolding of nature. Just as a wave returns to the ocean, so do our bodies and thoughts dissolve into the larger whole. There is no absolute death because nothing escapes the substance of God/nature. Everything is eternally part of the divine. Spinoza's God does not promise personal immortality, nor does it guarantee justice in the human sense. What it offers instead is a kind of immortality of perspective. When you live in accordance with reason and attain that intellectual love of God, you align yourself with the eternal aspects of existence. Your individual form may pass, but the ideas, understandings, and insights you awaken continue as part of the total system of reality. This is why Spinoza saw philosophy not merely as an intellectual exercise, but as a form of spiritual practice. To study nature, to grasp its laws and patterns, is to approach the divine. Every insight gained, every illusion dispelled, brings us closer to peace. The mind, understanding its place within the infinite, no longer clings to petty concerns. It ceases to be tormented by fear of death or anxious craving for approval. And yet, despite the elegance of this system, Spinoza remains a controversial figure. His refusal to conform to traditional ideas of God made him a target in his time. And even now, his work challenges the very foundations of Western religious and philosophical thought. He asks us to let go of comforting fictions, to stop imagining ourselves as the center of a universe designed for our benefit. In their place, he offers a radical humility. We are tiny expressions of an infinite whole, significant not because of our uniqueness, but because we are inseparable from the totality. In a modern world increasingly shaped by ecological crisis, political division, and spiritual disillusionment, Spinoza's philosophy has never been more relevant. His insistence on the unity of all things, on the divinity of nature itself, calls us to rethink our relationship to the world. If we truly believed that every creature, every tree, every river, and every human being is an expression of the same divine substance, how would that change the way we live? How would it alter the choices we make, the conflicts we pursue, the lives we value? Philosophers and scientists alike have begun to recognize that our survival as a species depends not just on technology, but on a profound transformation of consciousness. A shift from the illusion of separation to the reality of interconnection. Spinoza offers a blueprint for that transformation. His system, built on logic and reason, leads inevitably to a reverence for nature, a commitment to understanding rather than dominating the world, and a belief that peace comes from knowing, not controlling. What's perhaps most remarkable is that Spinoza never framed this as a set of commandments. There are no decrees from on high in his philosophy, no divine rewards for obedience. The path he outlines is one of voluntary understanding. You are free to embrace or ignore the truth of nature's necessity. But he promises, and countless thinkers have agreed, that to walk this path is to discover a depth of peace and joy unavailable to those who cling to illusions. So when you look up at the night sky, at the stars that seem infinite in number and unfathomable in age, consider this: you are not beneath them. You are not separate from them. You are an expression of the same reality, a fleeting configuration of divine substance, thinking, feeling, and moving within the vastness of the infinite. Spinoza's God is not a king to be worshipped, but a mystery to be understood. And in that understanding, you might find something far more powerful than salvation. You might find peace. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe in a personal God, a divine force, or a universe governed purely by natural laws? How do you make sense of your own place within this infinite whole? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's explore this mystery together.